Thanks so much, Cass, and welcome to everybody to this fantastic webinar on digital upskilling for not-for-profits here during Get Online Week. As Cass said, I'm Jess Wilson. I'm the National Director of Good Things Foundation, and it's my pleasure to be working alongside our colleagues from PwC today to present this webinar to you. Before we start though, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which I'm coming to you from today, which are the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation. And I'd like to pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. And because we are coming to you from all over the world and you are joining us from all over Australia today, I would really love it if you would acknowledge the traditional owners of the land from which you're coming in the chat panel as you can this morning. So welcome to this wonderful webinar. I suppose we need to talk about why we're here and why digital inclusion is important, why we're even having Get Online Week. And that's really because 2.5 million people in our country are not online. That's a significant percentage of the population, about 10% of the population. And 4 million people are estimated to have low digital skills. And so that's a significant number of people who really need support to be able to get online. And those people are people that mostly not-for-profit organisations like yours are supporting. So it's older Australians are more likely to be digitally excluded, people with disabilities, people who have low income, who have low education, who may not be employed, Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. So there's a whole lot of people that you're already supporting that really need support to get online and to make sure that they have the skills and confidence to be able to use technology safely. So Get Online Week last year, this is Get Online Week last year, we had around 1,000 events, and this year we weren't really sure what would happen because of COVID, but we do have over 700 events, organisations participating in Get Online Week this week, and I've participated in quite a few of them already, and they've been brilliant. A combination of online and face-to-face, COVID-safe face-to-face events. Good Things Foundation is a social change charity, and we're focused on improving people's lives through digital, and in particular supporting people to have the skills and confidence they need to be able to get online. And we do that in partnership with over 3,000 community partners all over the country, and I'm really pleased to know and to note that there's a number of them here in this webinar today. One of the important things about those community organisations, alongside helping people in their community to improve their digital skills and confidence, is that actually through delivering the digital inclusion programs, they have seen that 65% of their staff have also increased their digital skills. And that's really important for today's conversation, because we know that it's really essential that not-for-profits not only support the people in their communities to increase skills, but also support their staff to do so as well. Thanks, Blake. But you know that COVID has certainly changed the world that we live in. And our community partners went from delivering face-to-face support to people all over the country to learn digital skills to having to do that digitally. And that's a real challenge. We know that 55% of them had an online element. So they were teaching people how to use Zoom over Zoom. And that's a really big thing to have to do. We also know that 3 out of 4 of those organisations offered more support to people in their community during lockdowns than they were before lockdown. So whether that was how to use Zoom so they could stay connected with their families, whether that was how to buy groceries online so that they could actually get food into the house, or whether it was just making sure that they were staying connected to them so they weren't socially isolated. It's been a really, really important year, and not-for-profits have played a significant role in ensuring that people have stayed connected. So this is one of our community partners that was able to do that. And what we discovered through COVID, that it wasn't just digital skills and confidence that was important in supporting people. And we know this from the Digital Inclusion Index, that it's really essential people have access to devices and connected devices as well. So this is a little story of one of our partners from York CRC over in Western Australia, who was able to deliver devices through our devices grant from the Be Connected program. to people in their community who really needed to stay connected to people during the lockdown. It was essential that we made sure that not only people had the skills and confidence, but they had those connected devices to be able to do so. So a brilliant story there from York CRC, and there's fantastic stories like that all over the country. And I know that that our colleagues at PwC are going to share some of those fantastic stories with you as well about the work that people are doing out in the community and not-for-profits. So here we are at the opportunity to introduce those fantastic speakers today. So I'm going to do that quick introduction. I'm there clearly, Jess Wilson. I've already introduced myself, but I'd like to introduce to you Vishy Narayanan, who is the Chief Digital and Information Officer at PwC. Vishy is an accomplished digital transformation executive with expertise across marketing and technology, strategy and implementation, and he's held leadership roles in ASX listed companies, blue chip professional services, and in innovative startup businesses. As the Partner and Chief Digital and Information Officer at PwC, his role is to drive change and help strengthen PwC's innovative culture and the digital mindset across the whole business. Vishy has also just been appointed as a member of the Good Things Foundation board. So it is wonderful to have Vishy with us today. Then we have Luke, who is a leader in PwC's Australia's Chief Digital Office based in Sydney. He leads digital transformation programs across Australia and the Pacific, and he's had experience doing that across the US, UK and Australia. His expertise spans digital innovation and transformation, change management, digital upskilling, and the future of work. And he is passionate about enabling organisations to embrace challenges in technology and ways of working to better equip them for the future. So it's brilliant to have Luke here. Welcome, Luke. And then we have Laurence Duguay. Laurence is a change manager at PwC's digital transformation program and has built her expertise working in Canada and Australia on large-scale digital transformation programs. She's recently been awarded with the 30 Under 30 ARN Emerging Leaders, which is wonderful to recognise managers who have made a vital contribution to the organisation and their community. And at PwC, she has collaborated with senior business leaders to digitally upskill the workforce and enable teams to innovate on client engagements and projects. And she's also passionate about working with not-for-profits. So it's brilliant to have you all here today. And I'm going to hand over to you to talk about the work for upskilling not-for-profits.
Thank you, Jess, and hello all. Fantastic to join you remotely through a Zoom webinar. It's also great to see all those chat messages flowing through and see that there are so many people joining this webinar from all over the country. I'm really excited, as Jess said, to be here today with my colleagues to share a little bit of our journey, but also draw the parallels between that experience and your environments. But before I start, I'd also like to pay my respects to the traditional custodians of the land we're meeting on today. I'm in Barangaroo. We're meeting on the land of the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation. I pay my respects to their elders, past, present, and emerging. So before I came to the office today, I'm actually in the office, as are my colleagues. My 14-year-old son said, you're running a webinar on Zoom and you're going into the office. Why? Can't you just do it from home? So that is the world we live in today, where we can pretty much do this from anywhere, and we'll talk about how to enable that at scale. So for me, fundamentally, I believe that everyone should be able to live, learn, work, and participate in the digital world. At PwC, it's a journey that we've been on for the last 3 years, and we're still constantly learning. So I'm not here to say we've got the perfect art, but it's a lot of experiences that we are really willing to share. We're also on a journey to transform our organization and upskill our own people, because our people are our greatest asset, and as are in all our organizations, and we really have chosen to invest in our people. We call this New World, New Skills. It was a tagline that existed probably 18 months ago, and never has it been more relevant. We are living in an entirely new world post the pandemic, and we need new skills to navigate this. So that's the reason we call it New World, New Skills. COVID-19 has also brought significant challenges to most organizations. And I know I'm speaking for a lot of you where you've been navigating what the last 6 months has brought in terms of challenges, but clearly it also creates opportunities, and that's where we want to focus on the rest of our discussion today. So before I start, I'd love to put a poll up just to understand who's joining us today, whether you're a board member, a leader, an employee, or a volunteer. So we'll just give you some time to respond to this. So while I'm waiting for the questions to filter through, there's a really good question. What does PwC stand for? And it's remiss of me to jump straight in. PwC is PricewaterhouseCoopers. It's a consulting, advisory, audit, tax business. We've been around in various shapes for over 130 years. We're actually a very traditional organization that's managed to reinvent ourselves every 10 years or so. And we are fortunate enough to be in the position of one of the largest professional services firms in Australia. We work across entire sectors, public sector, government, our financial services sectors. So apologies for not hitting that up front, and thank you for asking the question. So sharing the results from the polls, we've got a large percentage that are either leaders in the not-for-profits or employees. There's a few volunteers, and there's a good chunk of board members. So thank you for that. It gives us a pretty good indication of the target audience. So if I can go to the next slide. So what are we here to achieve today? Hopefully, if we can achieve these three things, we'd have had a pretty good session with you. So firstly, fast-tracking digital transformation. So sometimes you might have heard that digital transformation is only for the large businesses. It's for large corporates, it's for governments. I think the last 6 months has taught us it's actually for organizations of all sizes, all shapes, all denominations, and especially for the more agile, smaller, nimble organizations that a lot not-for-profits are in. You can actually leverage the benefits of digital transformation. We'll then share some learnings from, we did a not-for-profit CEO survey, which really provided some interesting anecdotes and insights around how the CEOs of not-for-profits look at digital upskilling and what their plans are. Then Laurence, my colleague, will take you through some of the more practical ways to assess and build those skills in your own environment. And then finally, Luke will share some success stories of organizations that have navigated this and have used technology to achieve their organizational objectives. And here's our hope is when we're sitting here 6 months from now, 12 months from now, you become one of those case studies and success stories of how you leverage that. And that's our sincere ambition coming out of today's session. So before I go into the what defining digital transformation, I'd like to bring up a second poll, please. And the poll is and if I can ask you all to answer the questions as openly as possible. So the question is, how confident are you that technology can enable better outcomes for your not-for-profit organization and key stakeholders, notwithstanding some of the challenges of affordability, budget, resource constraints? How confident are you that it can be? Okay, we're starting to see some interesting results come through. Okay, so very promising results. So what we're seeing is roughly 85% of you think you're really confident or confident that technology can enable better outcomes. And then there's a few that are quietly confident, somewhat confident. So that's a really good starting point. And I know some of the challenges are in the how, right? So yes, we get it, but how? And that's what we're hoping we can spend a bit of time. So there's a lot of buzzwords in the industry, digital transformation, lots of people throw big terms. To simplify it, the way to think about digital transformation is to rethink how an organization like yourself can leverage technology, people, processes to adapt to new opportunities and challenges. So if you look at the last 6 months, we've pivoted to working remotely. We've changed the way we engage with each other. We've changed the way we share information. And a lot of that has happened out of necessity. But imagine if we were able to do this more in a planned way and actually drive this forward. And that is one of the opportunities of digital transformation. What it's not just about the technology. Very often people think about implementing new technologies and say, we've digitally transformed our organization. Technology is just one element of it. It's the people component of it that we'll talk about, the skills that your teams need. And also a way to acknowledge that the previous way of working sometimes may not always be the way we need to work going forward. And never has it been a truer statement when the pandemic is hit, and we'll touch on some of the changes. So we're fundamentally starting to relook at our real estate. What does the workplace mean, the physical workplace? How do we engage with each other? How do we share our information, our assets, our experiences in a more virtual way? It's not to say physical will never be replaced, but how do we add digital to our armory of how we engage? It's probably the way I would think about it. So if I can go to the next slide, we wanted to look at how do you fast track your digital transformation, right? And this is a question I get asked a lot. Vishy, we live in a really constrained environment, right? It sounds really good for a large organization to say, go digitally transform. How can I do that? So the first thing is a clear direction. One of the leaders I look up to a lot and I try and learn from is the CEO of Microsoft, Satya Nadella. And if you read some of his work, he made a statement just last week. I was listening to one of his podcasts. He said, the trait that sets leaders apart is their ability to drive clarity, energy, and success in a constrained environment. And that is absolutely the environment in which we all live in. So the first thing in how we fast track your digital transformation is being really clear on why you're transforming and what it is that you need to transform. And you can't transform everything in an organization. It's really about prioritization, which brings me to my second point, is a clearly prioritized roadmap where you've taken your organization and your stakeholders through it, and you have buy-in from them. Because this is not something that one individual or one organization, one person can do. You need to achieve this through collaboration, which we'll touch on a little while. So be clear on why you need to transform, be clear on the priorities that you need to transform, but the most important thing, the focus on your people. Embracing a digital first mentality where you set the tone at the top. An example, you can either ask someone in your team to embrace digital and it's good for them, or you put yourself through that learning pathway and then show them how you've learned it. Nothing beats experience. So if you do it yourself and as a leader, you're seen to be doing it yourself, that flows through the organization and everyone then embraces the technology. And we have these conversations even at PwC across the partnership and senior leaders that if you want your people to embrace digital, you have to embrace it first and give them the permission and the license to do it that way. So these are the three factors that we think can help fast track digital transformation. So if you move to the next slide, please. So digital transformation and COVID, we've spent a fair bit of time talking about COVID, and in many ways, it's accelerated the need for change. I did a media interview a few months ago, and one of the things I said in our own journey of PwC, I'm hoping that 2020, along with the challenges, is also earmarked for the year Australia truly went digital. And I believe that we have the opportunity to pivot the way we've been doing business and embrace some of the opportunities digital gives us, notwithstanding some of the challenges. So no doubt it's contributed to the digital divide, which organizations like the Good Things Foundation are working extremely hard to bridge, but equally it creates opportunities. So it also has a lot of benefits, including enabling you to spend more time where it matters. So just think about our own organizations, the amount of time we spend getting information from A to B, sourcing it, working on it, producing reports. So imagine if we can use digital to automate and make those processes a lot easier, we can then spend our time on providing the real differentiated services that you all do really well. So done properly, digital transformation can do these things. It can increase your connectivity with communities and your partners. Remember, you're not alone. There are so many people on this call. There are partners in the industry that you can collaborate with to actually achieve a better outcome. And a lot of the technology organizations are keen to partner where it's clear what the ask is. So sharpen the ask. Be clear on what the ask is from your partnership. Helping teams work flexibly and with agility. There's a saying, work is what you do, not where you do it. Over the last 20 years, for some reason, work has become where we go. And there's a lot of social elements of that, but there's also how you do it, and technology has really enabled that. Help with planning. So teams spend, as I said, less time on information gathering and more time on service delivery. Providing more accessibility to the services and resources that you have. I mean, there's so many wonderful organizations on this call. Imagine if you could share your expertise and your offerings with each other and with the wider network. Digital is a way that can help enable that. And finally, it allows you to meet your purpose and goals more efficiently. Despite the fact that we are all in the not-for-profit and other industries, efficiency is still absolutely key. If we can do something more efficiently and effectively, then we should embrace it, and technology certainly allows that. So I just want to share a few stats before I pass on to my colleague, Laurence. So we ran this survey, and I'm just sharing some top line stats. And if there's more information required, please reach out to the team and we can provide that to you. So we ran this survey just this year, and we actually were really struck by some of the results. So 77% of the CEOs of not-for-profits state that their employees need digital upskilling. It's become even higher in the context of COVID. So if I ran the survey today or last week, the number would be higher. I can absolutely relate to that. The second is 61% of the CEOs say that the greatest challenge in their upskilling efforts is a lack of resources to conduct the upskilling programs needed. So at the end of this, we will share some resources to get you started. In the event that it's definitely not something that'll take you the full journey, but it's at least a conversation starter about how you can get started if you've not done so already. 1 in 3 of the large not-for-profits have undertaken a program and have seen organizational growth as a result of the program. So we know it works. From a PwC context, I can attest to the fact that it works. From a not-for-profit, based on the survey, it works. And some of the case studies we'll talk to you about, we absolutely know it works. We just need to give it the time, space, and energy it deserves, and the partnerships you can collaborate on to deliver that. But nearly half the not-for-profits are not making sufficient progress or not considering collaboration. So my ask of you and others here are, as I said, this is a key priority. How do you not just do it yourself, but how do you collaborate and do this at scale? And there's many resources available to you to get started. So what this survey tells me at a high level is it is definitely identified, digital upskilling is identified as an enabler of successful digital transformation. And COVID just, the coming out of the pandemic makes it even more important. The need for upskilling is not consistently being addressed across the not-for-profit sector. And I think there are some barriers in doing so, including lack of resources, but there are the opportunities for partnerships with corporate, academics, and others to leverage. So that's sort of how I'm summarizing the survey. So my last slide before I hand over to Laurence is, so what can you expect? So, Vishy, you've spoken a lot about digital upskilling. Sounds good. So what can we expect? I think the number one thing we've seen is stronger culture from an employee and volunteer engagement. People feel engaged, people feel motivated and committed to their organization. The second, greater innovation. I mean, some of the stories I hear on a daily basis is phenomenal. Like people that have not really been technology savvy have embraced technology, and they've come out of the other end going, this is it's fundamentally changed the way I do things. And I never get tired of listening to the stories. And I'm hoping you all share a few coming out of today's session of your own success stories. Sharing successes is a key part of how we drive this, right? So success leads to more success. And if you can share some success stories and learnings with each other and use yourself as a community, that's the way we take this forward. The last is organizational growth. So we all have seen that as PwC, we were operating in the office. When the pandemic happened, we moved from 8% of the workforce working remotely to 97%. And we did that over 4 days. And it wasn't just the technology, it's people's confidence and the skills to do that. And I've heard so many stories of organizations like that, big, small, otherwise. So for me, the thing is, there's a lot of research, there's a lot of delivered experience that this works. The question is, how do you get started? And for that, I'm going to hand over to Laurence, my colleague, to give you some practical tips on how to get started. And we'll come back in the end and summarize. So thank you. Over to you, Laurence.
Thanks, Vichy, and what a beautiful segue as well. Hi, everyone. My name is Laurence. I'm also very excited to be here. And for those who missed the introduction, at PwC, I'm actually a change manager. So what does a change manager do? Some of you might not know. My role within my team is really to help people adapt and make sure that they're maximizing their new ways of working. So my team and I, working alongside Vichy and Luke, we really work with leaders and their teams to make sure that any digital transformation or digital upskilling program are resulting in benefits for our teams, for the organization, and for the individual themselves. There's a few things I want to cover in this section today. As Vichy mentioned, I really want you to come out of this session with some good tips and tricks on how to get started on your digital upskilling journey. At the beginning, we started a poll. We have a bit of a mix. So we have some leaders, we have some employees, we have some volunteers. So these tips and tricks can be useful whether you're starting your own personal digital upskilling journey or whether you're trying to set it up for your team or within your organization as well. When we talk about digital upskilling, I do want to emphasize that one key element is making sure that you're also finding ways not just to build your people's skills, but also make sure that they're connected to what they're doing in their day-to-day work, right? Because the digital upskilling program value is only coming if you're actually putting your skills to work when it comes to your day-to-day job. So how do we start with digital upskilling program? And we can kind of summarize, and this is based out of lessons learned that we had here at PwC. There are kind of two critical questions that you'll need to go back to as you're setting up your digital upskilling program. The first one, who are you trying to upskill? And when I talk about who is asking the right question, how are people within your organization delivering value now versus how do they need to deliver value in the future? What are some of their needs, or what are some of the challenges that they have that digital could help resolve? So that's what we mean when the first step is really linking at who are you trying to upskill. The second question, once you understand who you're trying to upskill, is what are some of the critical digital skills that they need? And the reason why I put some emphasis on this is because what we've learned over time, it's really hard if you're not targeting the things that are meaningful and impactful. You won't be able to do everything at the same time. And if you want to get some of the benefits that Vichy mentioned around employee engagement, around innovation, around organizational growth, you'll need to make sure that you're targeting the right things. These two questions, they might look very simple, but they're really at the root of any digital upskilling program. And the reason why is because technology is always evolving, right? So you want to make sure that as you're putting your digital upskilling program in place, you're always going back to these questions, you're being adaptable and flexible, and always checking in to adjust your approach as you go as well. So we'll start by looking at the first question around who you're trying to upskill. Blake, if you can just move to the next slide, please. Thanks. The reason why you need to understand who you're trying to upskill is because you want to make sure that you're maximizing the impact of your upskilling effort. Vichy mentioned that a lot of you guys are under resource and budget constraints, so you want to make sure that you're spending the time where it's valuable as well. One of the key things when you're trying to understand who you're trying to upskill is also making sure that you understand what is everyone's starting point. It takes a bit of time to do this assessment, but it's really critical because that's going to help you focus, as I said, on the right things afterwards. But it's also going to help you understand how are people being upskilled and need to be upskilled. So what we've done is we kind of partnered with the Good Things Foundation, and we drew some profiles, learner profiles that we want to look at today. And this is really kind of to understand how are people going to get on the digital upskilling journey. And you can look at this as an individual, but you can also look at this as part of an organization. So there's kind of three profiles that we looked at. And the first one is the observer. So the observer is someone that doesn't necessarily understand how they can benefit from technology, because maybe they're just very comfortable in the way they're doing things right now. It's working well, and there's no really an opportunity that they see in using technology to change the way they work. An observer is maybe someone that is scared of how technology is going to change their role, or is someone maybe that just doesn't know where to start. The explorer is a bit different. The explorer is someone that is going to be curious. So it might be someone that's seeing other people use technology to work differently or try new things, but then doesn't necessarily have the level of skills or confidence to be able to do it themselves. They're going to try to help others, but maybe they need support as well to be making sure that they're tapping into their skills. Our accelerators on the other side are the ones that are very confident with their skills. These are the people that are already skilled and are already using technology to solve client problems or partner problems or community problems. These people also have the benefits of being able to help others, and you want to leverage them because they're going to have a big impact on your organization. When you look at these profiles, I want you to think that it's not just about technical skills. When we talk about digital upskilling, it's way more than just technical skills. It's also about people's mindsets. It's also about people's behavior. And it's also about how people are connecting with technology, right? So what we call here at PwC relationship. So to give you a quick example, I'm a bit of an observer when it comes to technical skills. You should have seen Luke trying to coach me on chat on how to change my beautiful background before the session. But when it comes to my mindset, I'm way more of an explorer. I'm savvy, I want to try new things, I'm curious, and I know that I need to adapt to changes in technology. So when it comes to upskilling me, my team knows that they need to spend a bit more time and they need to show me how to start, right? So that's a good example of saying, when you look at upskilling, digital upskilling, make sure you understand the needs of your people, make sure you understand where they are and when they start, and that's going to help you assess what the learning curve is as well. I don't know, Vichy or Luke, if you want to kind of share where you feel you sit on the scale as well.
You want to go first, Vichy?
Sure. So I think this is one that you always think you are an accelerator until you speak to your 14-year-old kids or your 12-year-olds, and then you very quickly realize you're more of an observer, and they are learning at a very different pace. But for me, I think jokes aside, it's really about applied knowledge, right? At the end of the day, theoretical knowledge is great, but the more you can get these skills and apply it on a day-to-day basis and get that hands-on experience, that's what makes this real. And so that's sort of how I look at it, is I'm constantly somewhere between an explorer and an accelerator, but never quite getting to an accelerator.
I think we're all bringing very similar answers in this one. So I think firmly believed I was an accelerator. And then coming into PwC, actually Laurence was the person who made me realize that perhaps I wasn't an accelerator, probably at the lower end of explorer, and really helped work with me to build my technical skills to be alongside my mindset. And so to take Laurence's lead, the best way to approach me as a learner is hand in hand, hand-on tools, targeted outcomes to see the results as I'm learning. That's the best way to get me going.
Right. So we have a bit of a mix between all of us, and I think that's how we're also working together, is making sure that we're aware whenever we're trying to build our set of skills, or whether we're helping others build their skill as well, that we understand what the needs of others are. So we're going to pull up our third poll, and we're going to ask you the question, actually, if you had to rank yourself with these profiles, and it's possible that you're a bit like me, right? You sit in between, kind of where you sit. So I'll just leave you a couple of seconds to answer that poll.
Hi, it's Cass from Good Things Foundation here. So we have had some questions come through on how you can upskill volunteers or the community members that you're supporting at your community organisation. So we're definitely going to come back to that a little bit later in the presentation while you're voting there. So I've definitely seen that question. We're going to come back to that one a bit later. But one of the things that we talk about at Good Things Foundation is very similar to what's on your screen now, is understand where people are starting from and working with them. So got that poll just finishing up there now for you.
We have a lot of people kind of sitting at the explorer level. I think that's a safe place to be. And I think it shows the fact that you're here today, that you're willing to kind of build your skills, you're being curious, you're willing to explore. So that's great. And again, this exercise that we're doing, as Cass just mentioned, it's something that you can do regardless of who you're supporting, whether it's people within your communities, understanding the needs of the people you're supporting, or whether it's inside your organization, also understanding what are some of the needs that you have in there. Again, the value of this is understand everyone's starting point, being better able to identify some of the gaps, and we'll talk about some targeted skills that you can look at in a sec. And then the last thing is also, once you understand where people sit and you understand the way they learn, you can also understand the best resources that are available to help them learn as well. So now
Laurence, if I can just ask a question that's come in on that topic, how do you work out where you sit? So how would you know where someone sits? Is there checklists? Or I know we provide the community organisations we work with a bit of a digital skills questionnaire, so they can sit with someone and actually check off what they do or don't know. Is that the kind of thing that you've seen work with this tool as well?
Yeah, so these ones we've kind of built ourselves based out of some of the information that we have. So you can do a bit of an assessment when you have a good knowledge of either the community you work in, or your volunteer workforce or your employee workforce, and kind of build some of the trends that you're seeing and try to bucket people into different categories. But there's, I don't know, Vichy, if you want to touch on the DFA just now, which could be a good way to also for people to map kind of where they sit.
Yep, it's a really good question. And I think it comes up a lot regardless of the size of organization. Where do I actually sit? I think part of this is, so we have, as Laurence mentioned, at the end of the session, we will share some access to some free tools. So we have this tool called the Digital Fitness Assessment Tool. It's available in most app stores for free. You download it, you run a bit of a test early, and it gives you a score, right? It's a little bit like marking an exam, and then it tells you where you sit in terms of your persona, and it gives you some tailored tips on how to improve that. The way I would like you to think about this, though, is not in absolute terms, so not as 3 blocks, but we all, as Laurence said, we sort of move in and out depending on the topic, right? So, and when Laurence will touch on some key areas, foundational skills. So in foundational skills, we might be an accelerator, but in data, we might be an observer, for example, because we don't play data. So I think the simple way to think about it, observer, someone that stands on the sideline, looks at it, but hasn't engaged with it. An explorer, someone that's got their hands dirty a little bit by playing with it, not necessarily figuring it all out yet, but not afraid to give it a go. And then the accelerator is someone that uses it pretty much without a second thought, uses technology. So that's sort of how I would think about it. But it's really important that you start to form your own definitions as you in your own organizational context. So hopefully that answers the question.
Yeah, and that's a really good point. And just talking about the DFA, the digital fitness assessment, which we'll all provide a link to you guys as well. This is something that is an individual assessment. So you'll kind of get a bit of a feel of where you sit as at personally. But I think it's also really interesting to do, as Vichy said, a bit of an exercise, especially if you're a leader within an organization or a leader within a team, or you're leading a volunteer group and you want to kind of just understand where people sit at. And once you've done the exercise of who you're trying to upskill, it makes it easier to define what are the critical skills that you should target for each group, because not each group requires the same level of skill or same digital skills. And this is kind of the second question that we'll jump into. So once you've done your assessment and you looked at and you have a good understanding of what's everyone's starting point and what are some of the needs and one of the challenges that digital can help them solve, you need to start looking at what are the right digital skills that these different groups need to have. And as I said, not everyone needs to have the same digital skills. And it's about finding that balance between having core foundational skills and more advanced digital skills as well. So what we've done is we've actually mapped a few different categories of skills that I'm going to talk to you guys about today. These are non-exhaustive, meaning that there are other categories of digital skills that you can also have or need within your organization. But these ones are very critical when we look at the new ways of working and obviously some of the impact of COVID-19. On the left side, you'll see that we're talking about foundational digital skills. These are the skills that you need to really make sure that people know how to look for information and use communication technology. So we're talking things like connecting to Zoom, searching the internet, managing your emails efficiently, right? So that's something that is really critical. And I don't know if some of you guys had the opportunity to read the report that was shared yesterday by the ADIA, but what they said in that report, in their roadmap to close the digital divide, one of the things they highlight is to make sure that people have foundational digital skills in their personal life, but also in their professional life. So having those transferable skills from your personal to your professional life as well to close the digital divide as well. So foundational digital skills is a great one, especially when you're looking at some of the work your volunteer workforce will do, connecting directly with your people, making sure that they know how to use the information and use communications technology as well. The second bucket is actually not about digital skills. It's really about digital mindset. So making sure that you're building the awareness, of people to find new ways of working and to find resources to look to approach a problem differently. And one of the key things with digital mindset is also connecting things together, right? So if you have two sets of skills, how can you bring them together to bring and solve some kind of critical problems? The third one is a very important one. Not everyone in your organization will need that one, but this is something that is critical to any organization, whether you're in the not-for-profit sector or in your corporate sector, is around data skills. So we all have a significant amount of data, and it's really important that you have the skills required within your organization to solve problems more efficiently, but also to use it to your advantage to provide better insights to your partners and your community. Some of the data skills can be understanding and being able to pull some reports on what are the most the initiatives that are the most active within the community. How is your business or your not-for-profit really making an impact within the community? Being able to report on that kind of information comes from being able to work with data. The fourth bucket is around collaboration. So Vichy mentioned it, the world is changing and it's not going to go back to what we had before COVID. It's likely going to come somewhere in the middle in a bit of an hybrid approach. So making sure that people within your organization have the collaboration digital skills. So bridging that gap between working in person and working remotely, and making sure that people can work together and collaborate together in a dynamic manner. The last bucket is the one that is often forgotten, but we've put it here because COVID-19 has also reinforced the need to get those skills, especially in the not-for-profit sector, is around cyber. So obviously, as we're going more and more remote and we're more and more connected, there's a lot of need to making sure that we're managing cyber risk within organization and that we're keeping your crown jewels protected at all times. So your crown jewel is really the thing that matters the most to you, whether that's all your information that you have on your members, whether that's access list to all your initiatives, is making sure that what needs to be protected is protected and that you're also providing your members with some security around cyber risk as well. So to recap, how you can get started, and I'm seeing some questions pop in at the bottom about this as well. It's really important before you start that you understand what's your starting point. What are some of your needs? And as Vichy mentioned, making sure that whatever you invest from a digital upskilling standpoint is connected back to that strategic vision, that roadmap that you've set for your organization. Then it's also about making sure that you're focusing on the right thing. As we mentioned, even at PwC, when we try to do everything at the same time, it just doesn't work, right? So you need to make sure that you're focusing on the skills that are most meaningful, impactful, the skills that will translate into active ways of working so that people will actually benefit from, and you'll see some of the organizational outcomes out of it, and you prioritize first. And then the third thing, and I know I've seen a lot lot of questions about resources is know the resources that are available to you. So there's a lot of resources that we will share later as well with you guys. But one of the things that we thought was good is provide you with this placemat. You'll get the link to it. Don't worry, after the session. But what this placemat does is based out of what you answered earlier in the poll, whether you're an observer, an accelerator, or an explorer, or a little bit of everything. We've provided you with some links to get started on those kind of targeted digital skills. And you can use this for yourself as kind of a way to check in and get started on your own personal digital upskilling journey. Or you can use this with your volunteer workforce or to have a conversation within your organization as well. So that's one of the key resources that we'll be providing to you guys after the session. So now that I've covered kind of digital skill, I'm going to pass it to Luke, who's going to talk a little bit about some not-for-profit organizations who were able to transform themselves using digital skills.
Thanks, Laurence, and thank you for the skills there. I think they're quite handy and very simple to pick up. And I was going to call out to the room actually that Laurence was probably one of the people who was most influential on my tech journey upon joining PwC. So thank you for that and for the patience. So as all the panelists today have already mentioned, the pace of change for our people has never been faster. And COVID's just added another layer on top of that. And everything there is based on what's the new normal, what's going to be the future of the way we work, the technology associated with that. In all this change, one thing that actually remains unchanged is the power of storytelling. And this has always been used to foster collaboration, cooperation, share information, and teach important skills. Historically in society, right now, perhaps more in a professional setting. And I think as Vichy and Jess also pointed out earlier on, the teacher often learns the most in these situations. And so going out on a limb to teach others often pays dividends. So today I've got 3 stories to talk to, and depending on time, I might be more concise with the final one. The first one is an example on data skills in PwC working with not-for-profits. The second one is an example of collaboration and digital mindset, also from the Good Things Foundation network. And finally, we have a very lovely example from the community, which I think Laurence actually brought to our attention. So before I dive in, I know we're already on the first page, just want everyone on the call to be reflecting on their own personal stories and experiences whilst we do this, and get ready to share those with people around you through social media. I think there's a hashtag later on, Get Online Week, that we really want to see you tag us in so we can see these stories come to life, because again, telling these stories is really how we bring this all to life. So in this first story, you can see that lovely picture of a koala on the front there. You'll all recall the devastating bushfires that were ravaging our country kind of at the start of 2020. And much like all of you, I'm sure I was caught up daily with checking the news every few minutes and looking for something I could do to support. For most of us, myself included, the most impactful thing we could do at the time was to donate money and resources to respective charities. And in this story, the not-for-profit in question was WIRES, the Australian Wildlife Rescue Organisation. Like many organisations at that time that had that purpose, they received an unprecedented amount of donations. Whilst it's obviously a great problem to have, it posed a very manual administrative burden on that organisation, which actually was limiting their impact, what they could achieve in taking that to the people who needed it most. In this story, PwC was able to use the skills from our own digital transformation around data and analytics and take that through to to support WIRES in tackling the mammoth reconciliation of all the donations they received. In this situation, our digital accelerators, Richard and Kwan, were able to quickly assess the problem at hand, build a successful automated data workflow in less than 1 day. And this enabled WIRES to manage the influx of donations efficiently, which then allowed them to go back to providing the high impact work they were doing in rescuing our wildlife. Whilst this story is quite specialist in its data skills, it's a great example of using technology within the not-for-profit sector to increase reach and impact in such a short time frame. Our next story is it's kind of a different angle, and this one I love a lot because it comes from the Good Things Foundation's network. And this particular story involves Lynn Brown. And in fact, if you're on the call, give us a wave. I'm not sure if she will be. Lynn, it was in her past life, a teacher, a librarian, and most recently a bookseller. And teachers, as I mentioned, are often born storytellers, and they learn the most when they impart that wisdom to others. And now in retirement, Lynn is a course tutor for a group of singers called is it U3A? Correct me if I said that one wrong. Yep, cool. And pre-COVID, this group met in person every week for singing classes. But as social distancing measures hit, this important time together was highly at risk. Knowing how important this time was to all the members in these communities, not only for their singing, but also their mental well-being, Lynn kind of got a creative thought going. Lynn, leaning into the change, initially gave it a go on Zoom by herself. As we're doing today, we're giving it a good go, we're all leaning in. Most members of the organization were very new to technology, and it was quite a steep learning curve. So Lynn, in a previous experience, had pulled on support from someone called Trish from the mentors group of the Good Things Foundation. I think it's the tech exec group. And with the support from Trish, they gave it another go. And it eventually, sorry, I lost my place. Eventually, Trish helped to upskill the committee members themselves to use Zoom, to start there, continue to join them in the coming weeks to ensure everything ran smoothly. And then eventually, a lot of the committee members went on to complete the Be Connected course online, as did some of the singers as well. On hearing this story for the first time, I was struck by how enthusiastically all the committee and singers embraced both the learning experience, but also the technology itself. And all it took was a little curiosity and giving it a go by Lynn. And I think there's a lovely quote, and you'll find this on the Good Things Foundation website. Lynn said, "Without the skills to do this, one can soon be left behind and out of the loop. My advice is to feel the fear and do it anyway." So I think I saw a nod about Lynn being on the call. It's a massive call out to Lynn and to Trish for the support as well.
I think Trish is definitely on the call, like Luke. So big shout out to you, Trish, and for all the work that you do.
I've just seen she's raised her hand. Good ID. Thank you, Trish. It's awesome work. And this is actually just one of the many stories on the Get Online Week library. And so please go there and check them out, because again, in preparation for today, I went through a lot of the stories we had in there, and they really touched my heart because they're so grassroots and attainable and achievable, and aren't relying on huge transformation efforts, but rather simple changes that happen in day to day that can be used to exponentially transform the reach of that person and that community organization. Our final story for today is not a recent one, but definitely one that speaks to our changing times. So the big issue, I'm sure everyone's aware, is a social enterprise magazine that originally came to Australia in 1993. And it aims to support people who are unable to access mainstream jobs. Each vendor effectively acts as a micro business owner. They earn their income through the magazine sales, grow their confidence and capacity to help themselves and then others. We've all probably bought at least a few copies of these during our lifetime. And these days, we all know the use of cash is diminishing. By virtue of this reduction in cash use in our economy, especially in Australia, it's reduced the amount of cash we just carry day to day. I don't know about you, but how many people actually have money in their wallet, cash money in their wallets right now? And for a cash-only micro business, this was quite a large issue. With support from the banking sector, the big issue vendors got a burst of support in technology to pivot to be able to accept digital payments in two different formats. The first was a NAB-supported FPOS tap and go. We were used to that. And the other was the BMIT app, which I think was a co-owned innovation by the banks in Australia. And so this all allowed the vendors to actually take cashless payments and still continue their great work. And you probably goes without saying that this intervention went a huge way to future-proof the big issue, micro entrepreneurs, and in the reduction of cash in our society. I'm conscious of time, and as you can probably tell, I can always get very excited and talk about lots of stories, but I think it's good to jump to your questions. I think we have time. And so I might, on that note, hand back to you, Vishy.
Thank you, Luke and Laurence, for sharing some personal experience along with your knowledge there. So I guess I just wanted to maybe provide some closing thoughts. If I go to the next slide, please. So digital transformation and upskilling are not out of your reach. They are absolutely within your reach, and they do deliver outcomes. So the key things to start looking at: what are the most critical needs of your people and your organization? And does your upskilling program address the need of the volunteer workforce? I saw a question earlier that says, you're talking about fast tracking and we haven't even started, right? It's a great question. And I think for me, the fast track is more the need for urgency given the current climate more than anything else. So I would just ask you to consider what are the critical needs, whether it's foundational skills, whether it's data skills. I just want to spend 30 seconds on the cyber, not to be underestimated, because it's not just protecting your data, it's actually building a safe, trusted environment on which you can conduct business. Sometimes it's as simple as that. And a lot of organizations, for various reasons have grown organically. So you've brought many technologies, many systems. Some things talk to each other well, some things don't talk to each other well. So just being aware of any cybersecurity challenges are worth looking at. The second is what will deliver maximum impact and value. So you may be looking to increase reach. So is that your number one focus? You're trying to drive efficiency. Is that your number one focus? You're trying to drive more engagement and more collaboration. You're trying to drive new ways of collecting funds and disbursing funds. You're looking at new ways of delivering services, a hybrid model. So it's really being clear on what is it that your upskilling journey and transformation is going to do, and then where will it drive maximum impact. And I would ask you to be very clear in picking no more than one or two things, because it's very tempting to take 6 things, but generally you pick 1 or 2 things and you can get them done and then come back to the rest on the list. The third point I want to mention is you're not alone, right? So what are the opportunities and partnerships you have to accelerate your digital upskilling journey? Across the sector, there are many universities, academic institutions that are offering digital skills that are accessible and scalable. Partnering with technology providers and the provision of technology. I know a lot of the big tech vendors are all playing quite actively in this space and supporting organizations. Across the employees, so they can embed their technology and solutions to support colleagues. So we really believe in the network effect of upskilling. It's a little bit like teaching someone to fish. You teach someone to fish and then they help others to prosper. It's the same sort of thing with digital skills. And the last thing is the power of a citizen-led approach. We call this a citizen-led approach within PwC because there's something about enabling the employees in your organization to really be the drivers of change and innovation. And not all change needs to come from the top. A lot of change can come from the bottom, or your volunteers or your outreach specialists. So I just want to close this part by saying a sincere thank you for the opportunity to share our stories, because these are not normal times. And I know that a lot of you are leaning on each other. So at this point, I'll just say thanks to my colleagues, but also open it up for any questions that we might have.
Thanks, Rishi. And we have had some questions coming through. And I might pop one over to Jess first of all. And we do have a whole bunch of resources which we'll send through links to after this. So don't worry, we just skipped over a couple of slides, but we will send them to you afterwards. But Jess, we've had a question come in. So we know that lots of not-for-profits don't have a lot of spare money. And so how can they, is any funding available to help organisations to do this and to upskill their community or their volunteers or maybe even their staff?
So I know we don't have a lot of time, but I would say that certainly there are opportunities to access funding to support the people in your community and to support people who are your volunteers to learn digital skills in particular through the Be Connected program, which is one of the programs that we run. We run a grant program through that, and there is funding available that we will provide to support people to upskill people in their teams to become digital mentors, we call them. So people like Trish that we've already talked about, that are those friendly people that can help others to learn digital skills, and also to support people in your community, particularly those who are over 50, whom we know are some of the most digitally excluded groups in those communities. But look, I think there's certainly a lot of work happening across government at the moment around digital transformation, and so I would say that there is also likely to be further funding coming out in the next few years. So I would definitely keep your eye out on that, but definitely if you're not part of the Be Connected network, I would encourage you to do that, and I know we'll send the links out to help people to do that.
Great, and we also had a question come through which I might ask Vishy. So Vishy, how do you see how not-for-profits are going in terms of upskilling versus corporates? Are corporates on a similar journey to not-for-profits in this space?
Yeah, thanks, Kaz. Also conscious of time, but look, I think the corporates are are all at various stages of this, right? They're not at a uniform stage. And as you saw in the not-for-profit survey that we talked about, the CEOs of not-for-profits absolutely are leaning into this, I would say in greater percentages than perhaps some of their corporate colleagues. The issue is one of how do they get it done, affordability, accessibility, and where do they start? So I think not-for-profits, I would almost say, have a much better early mover advantage, given the size and scale and the agility and the fact that they have people that wear multiple hats. You know, I worked for many and worked with many organizations in the past, and it's the agile nature that enables us to do that. But on the flip side, sometimes it gets too watered down and too general. So it's really important to be more specific in what you do. But I think there's a great opportunity facing not-for-profit sector with digital upskilling.
And I would add to that, Vishy, that I think we probably need to end on this one because we're out of time. But I would say that we've seen through COVID significant changes across the not-for-profit sector, and people being incredibly agile and adaptable and making real differences to people in their community. They've been able to flip really quickly, pivot as many other organisations have done to make sure that they're able to continue that support of community or people in their community. So I would definitely say that not-for-profits, community organisations out there are incredibly creative and are taking this on. And so anything we can do to help you to take that journey is definitely, we're happy to do.
Fantastic. Thanks, Jess. Thanks, Vishy. And thanks to all our panelists today. So we've just gone past 3 o'clock Sydney time, so we might start wrapping up. I know we didn't quite get to all of the questions that were in the chat panel, but a big thank you to everyone for joining us today on this webinar during Get Online Week. Really fantastic to have you come along. Get Online Week is all about helping people to improve their digital skills wherever they happen to be and wherever they're starting from. So really fantastic to have this conversation with the PwC Australia team today. Now, we have been recording it and we have got the slides, and so we are going to send them out to everyone who registered for the webinar after this. So you can expect an email from us, and what we'll do is we'll link in the email and those slides. There's a whole bunch of resources available for you and lots of free resources. So you can start there and have a look, and there's also our contact details too. So if you need to get in touch with us or catch up on those questions, do feel free to get in touch, and we'd be very happy to help you out if we can. So a big thank you to Luke, to Laurent, to Vishy and Jess, and happy Get Online Week, everyone, from all of us. Thanks.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you all.